What's up, guys? Tame Type 1 here. Got another big video for you, and I like sort of just looking at YouTube comments and answering them, so I'm going to keep doing that, all right? I got a comment recently asking about what the cause of diabetes was. Essentially, they're asking, hey, do carbohydrates cause diabetes? And this is actually a really good question. What causes Type 1 diabetes? Good question. Let's go ahead and go through it. And throughout this video, mind you, I'm not an expert on this kind of thing. I've done my own reading over the years, and I have my own logic. I've been able to make connections in my brain, and I have my theories, I have my ideas, and I have my doubts about certain things too. And I'll go over all that, but I'm going to try not to be too conclusive because it's not very conclusive. But let me start with what a lot of people think it might be. A lot of doctors, a lot of researchers are looking into things like genetics being the reason for type 1 diabetes. And I'll just go ahead and say I highly doubt that. Highly doubt it has anything to do with genetics, and I'll tell you why. Logically, it wouldn't make sense for a disease that's totally genetic to increase over time unless the disease was causing people to, have more kids than everyone else. Obviously not the case. And diabetes, as a matter of fact, not just type 2, but type 1 as well, has increased a lot over the past few decades. It's probably 50% higher than it was not so long ago. Why is this? Genetics cannot explain that. How could it be that it's something that's passed down, yet the people of previous generations had less of it? It's clearly not just genetic, and that's also a cop-out that people will use to say, oh, well, out of my control, can't do anything about it, it's genetic. No, 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 no. We have to have empiricism about this. We have to have a little bit of self-responsibility here. Remember that, yeah, bad things happen, and often there's a cause, and there's something we can do about it. Not just genetics. Genetics impact everything about you. So, yeah, genetics probably play a role in making type 1 diabetes happen, but genetics play a role in everything about you. So to say it's only genetic that's just a cop-out. I'm throwing that out right there. What else could it be? Well, let's say carbohydrates, for example. That was what the question was about. That's what spurred this sort of video here. Is it carbohydrates? I don't necessarily think it's that either. Unpopular, let me explain. Again, we have to be empirical here. If it was true that carbohydrates alone caused type 1 diabetes, then type 1 diabetes would have been a lot more common a long time ago. Because, throughout most of human history, once they discovered, agriculture, humans ate a lot of carbs. They ate a majority of their diet was carbs. Meat wasn't always as plentiful. Throughout most of human history, we had like rice and beans and bread and stuff. And we didn't have a ton of meat. We didn't have a ton of different vegetables stuff to choose from. Low carb is kind of a luxury compared to a lot of previous times in history and a lot of locations. Not everywhere. You have like the Maasai, you have like the Alaskans, but for most people in most places, carbs were always an essential staple throughout most of human history. And to say that that causes diabetes just flies in the face of reality. It's increasing now. It wasn't increasing then, it's increasing now. Did it exist then? Maybe somewhat, but I don't think it's just because of the carbs. I think there's more to it than that. Could carbs play a part? Yes, absolutely. And I mean, if you look at the research Dr. Bernstein's done, if you read his book, he goes over with the honeymoon period how beta cells that are still living, when you get diagnosed with diabetes, there's still some left that are producing a little bit of insulin. They're doing whatever they can. If you cut back on the carbs, those beta cells can live because they're under less pressure, and then you can keep churning on this honeymoon thing for a long time. I'll link a video below about that. So obviously, carbs play a part in the destruction of those beta cells. So there's something there, but what caused that destruction in the first place? I think it's deeper than that. Because again, carbs have existed for a very long time. Type 1 has not been nearly as rampant back then as it is now. Just a matter of fact, type 2 as well. So what could cause it? Now, carbs could be a factor, definitely a big factor, especially the type of carbs. See, because we have high fructose corn syrup, we have, highly processed, white bread full of sugar and crap. We were eating way more sugar than we have before, although honestly, as a percentage, less calories are from carbohydrates than they used to be. Another reason why it's not just carbs. But there's another food group that I think also you can lay a lot of blame on, and that's seed oils. Seed oils are known for causing inflammation, they're known for causing all these different health problems, and unlike carbohydrates, seed oils have been around for a very short period of time relative to human history. Since, the middle of the 20th century, really. And every single disease, from diabetes to cancer to heart disease, has all exploded since the introduction of seed oils. It's kind of experimental, and there's a lot of evidence suggests that experiment has failed disastrously. So seed oils, maybe combined with all the sugar and all the high fructose corn syrup and the processed grains, maybe that can play a big part in it as well. Certainly what you eat can play a big part. And I'll give you just an example from my own personal life too. I have a twin sister. Fun fact, I'm not giving any of you her number, don't even ask. I have a twin sister, and fraternal, we don't look the same, thank goodness. She always drank water when we grew up. I always drank Coca-Cola, soda, when we grew up. And I got diabetes and she never did. Now, that's a good case against it being genetic, for one, but it's also a case to say, well, certainly the soda may have had something to do with it. Obviously, my experience bears that out, right? But again, I think there's more here because sugar consumption hasn't gone up significantly, and yet diabetes has. So let's look a little bit deeper. Let's look a little bit deeper into this. Seed oils, yes, could be that. All the processed crap, all the high fructose corn syrup, yes, could be that. What else? What else? You have people like Weston A. Price, for example, who've looked into nutritional degeneration over the years, and he's found that stuff like raw milk, stuff like fermented products, they're actually essential for health as well. So maybe cutting all that out, sticking to pasteurized milk, things like this, maybe that had an impact as well. I'm not willing to rule that out. Just a quick aside, I don't want to go too deep in Weston A. Price. I love the guy, but I don't have every bit of information on him. But yeah, it's a good point. Raw milk and all these things, they're very healthy for you, and we've cut all that out, and we've replaced with pasteurization. Nothing's fermented anymore. They even, sprouted grains, fermented grains. We don't do any of that stuff anymore, and that gets rid of a lot of the anti-nutrients in all these vegetables, right? So maybe that as well. But I'll give one more thing, and this is going to be a little bit controversial. I'm going to try to say this as gently as I can. But think about what type 1 diabetes is. Okay? Let's just go through the logic here, right? Because it's all this is based on thinking. It's based on logic. It's based on if this leads to that, when this connect that. We're connecting puzzle pieces here. But if type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disorder, what happens when you stimulate someone's immunity insanely high when they're children, when they're infants? Because we know that diabetes happens. It can happen in infancy, it can happen when you're a little kid, it can happen when you're a teenager, so on and so forth. They even diagnose in adults now, right? Maybe that's a different situation, but we're going to talk about childhood onset, right? The original type 1. Now, what's something that happens in your childhood, in your infancy even, that hyperstimulates your immune system and could potentially cause autoimmune responses either then or later down the line? What's something that hasn't been very properly tested, hasn't been proven very, very safe by standards that most medicine is set to? What's something that you actually can't even sue the makers for if you have problems with it? It's literally not allowed. It's illegal to sue them. They have immunity. Well, kids, and you look at someone like Sweden too. There's something in common. Actually, no, Finland. Finland also has a very high increasing type 1 diabetes. I looked this up earlier. And one thing they have in common with us is that they have a pretty high vaccine schedule for their kids, infants to, toddlers to, little boys and girls. They have a pretty high vaccine schedule, and these vaccines aren't heavily tested as far as safety goes. There's not any, randomized long-term controlled trials where they're comparing vaccinated kids to unvaccinated kids. We'll love to see one where they maybe look at the Amish, or they look at some other country where the vaccines aren't as accessible, something like this, and see what their diabetes rates are like, or see what other autoimmune conditions are like. But yeah, there might be something there because, again, think about it. Diabetes is a disease that starts with your autoimmune system attacking your beta cells. Well, why are they attacking them? What's got them all hyperstimulated? I don't know, maybe something happened when they were younger that caused their immune system to become hyperstimulated. I'm just saying, I'm not trying to get too wacky here, I'm not trying to push you away, but I think it's one of those things that no one's willing to look into, no one's willing to talk about, no one's willing to really truly study, because it would be disastrous if the results came back in a way that they would not expect. So I'm not saying it is that, but I'm saying the possibility is there. But outside of that, if you want to avoid diabetes, be sure to just eat well, avoid the sugar, avoid the processed crap. Look into some Weston A. Price. He's got a lot of good stuff too. But I'll leave it at that. That's just my thoughts on what might cause diabetes. I hope you got a little bit out of this, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, all right? Keep taming your type 1.